Welcome to our deep dive into Vedanta. We've got a ton of sources here, all about this ancient philosophy. And we're going to explore how it can help us understand, well, ourselves and the universe, like on a deeper level, I think.
Yeah, what's really interesting about Vedanta is it doesn't shy away from like the big questions, you know?
Yeah.
It digs into the nature of reality, the whole concept of self-realization. And it even offers some practical tools for like overcoming suffering and finding true peace.
So we're not just like dealing with these abstract concepts. It seems like Vedanta is a philosophy that can be lived, a path to a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Exactly. And one of the key concepts we see in all these sources is this idea of Atman, or true self, which Vedanta says is identical to Brahman, the ultimate reality. That underlies all existence.
Okay, that's a big one right out of the gate. True self being identical to everything. Can you break that down a little?
Imagine looking at a wave in the ocean.
Okay.
We see it as like a distinct thing, but ultimately it's inseparable from the ocean itself.
Right.
In the same way, Vedanta suggests that everything we perceive, the whole physical world, is a manifestation of this deeper reality, Brahman.
So Brahman's like the ocean, the source, and we're like waves, individual selves. But how can we be both individual and part of this oneness?
That's where the concept of Maya comes in. Vedanta describes this as the illusion of separateness, like a veil that makes us perceive ourselves as distinct from the whole.
So it's not that the physical world isn't real, but it's our perception of it as separate and independent. That's the illusion.
Precisely. And it's this illusion of separation that Vedanta says is the root of our suffering. We cling to our individual identities, our desires, our fears, because we've forgotten our true nature as Atman, which is one with Brahman.
This concept of Maya being the root of suffering, it's intriguing. Can you give me an example like how this plays out in everyday life?
Sure. Think about like the anxiety we feel. When we're attached to a particular outcome, we worry about losing a job, a relationship, material possessions. This fear comes from the belief that our happiness depends on these external things, impermanent things.
Yeah, like we're constantly trying to grasp at waves, forgetting that they're just temporary and the ocean's always there.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And this grasping, this clinging, it's what Vedanta calls avidya.
Avidya.
The ignorance of our true nature.
Okay, so we've got Atman, Brahman, Maya, avidya. It's a lot to unpack. But how do we move beyond these concepts and experience this reality of oneness, of self-realization? How do we do it?
Well, Vedanta offers a path. It's a set of tools and practices for self-discovery. And it all starts with a simple question: who am I?
Who am I? Seems pretty straightforward. How does asking that lead to this profound self-discovery?
It's the beginning of self-inquiry, a process of peeling back the layers of our conditioned identities. The roles we play, the beliefs we hold, the emotions that we experience to get to the core of our being.
So it's not about coming up with like a definitive answer. It's more about the process of questioning, of looking inward.
Exactly. It's about challenging our assumptions about who we are and what really matters. And the self-inquiry is just one tool that Vedanta offers for this journey.
So what are some of the other tools, and how do they help us along this path?
Well, one of the key practices is meditation, which helps quiet the mind and cultivate a deeper awareness of our inner landscape.
Meditation is something we hear a lot about, but it can seem intimidating. How does Vedanta approach meditation?
Vedanta sees meditation as a way to connect with our true nature, that inner stillness. That lies beyond the constant chatter of the mind.
That makes sense. So it's not about like emptying the mind completely. It's about observing thoughts and emotions without getting carried away.
Precisely. It's about cultivating a sense of detachment from our mental activity, recognizing that we are not our thoughts, but the awareness behind them.
Okay, so we've got self-inquiry and meditation. What else does Vedanta offer for this self-realization journey?
Another important aspect is ethical living, or dharma.
Dharma. Now, that's a term I've heard before, but never fully understood. How does Vedanta define dharma?
In this context, dharma is about aligning our actions with our understanding of our true nature. It's about living in a way that reflects the truth of our interconnectedness with all beings.
So it's not about following a rigid set of rules, but more about living in a way that's harmonious with our inner truth and the world around us.
Exactly. And this can look like different things, like practicing kindness, compassion, honesty, and nonviolence.
Those ethical principles, they seem pretty universal, showing up in other traditions as well.
Absolutely. And Vedanta emphasizes that by living ethically, we purify the mind and create the right conditions for deeper self-understanding.
So ethical living is like preparing the soil for the seeds of self-realization to grow.
That's a great way to put it. And alongside ethical living, Vedanta also emphasizes detachment, or vairagya.
Now, detachment can sometimes sound negative, like becoming emotionally cold or withdrawn. How does Vedanta approach it?
Vedanta doesn't advocate for, renouncing the world or becoming emotionless. It encourages us to shift our perspective on desire and attachment.
So it's not about suppressing desires,
Yeah.
but understanding their nature and their potential to cause suffering.
Precisely. Vairagya is about loosening the grip of attachment to things that are ultimately impermanent,
Okay.
recognizing that true happiness can't be found in external objects or achievements.
Like realizing that chasing the waves won't bring lasting fulfillment, but that ocean of our true nature, it's always there, a source of peace and joy.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to understand it. And this detachment, this letting go, it creates space for a deeper fulfillment, a happiness that doesn't depend on outside things.
So we've covered self-inquiry, meditation, ethical living, and detachment. These are incredibly powerful tools, but how do they all work together? What's the overall goal here?
The ultimate goal in Vedanta is moksha, liberation from suffering.
Moksha. That sounds profound. But is this something we achieve in this lifetime, or is it after death?
That's a great question, and one we'll dive into more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, we've laid the groundwork, explored some core concepts of Vedanta, and the key practices it offers. Now, let's dive deeper into moksha, this liberation from suffering. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Vedanta. Before the break, we were talking about moksha, this state of liberation from suffering, and you were saying it's not like some far-off paradise, but something we can achieve in this life.
That's right. That's what the sources really emphasize. Moksha isn't about escaping the world or waiting for some reward in the future. It's about realizing a freedom that's already within us.
That's a powerful idea, but it brings up some questions for me. If we're already free, why do we experience so much suffering? And what does it actually mean to experience liberation while still living in this world?
Okay, think of it this way. We are like a dreamer, caught up in a dream, experiencing joy, fear, everything. But when they wake up, the dreamer realizes that it wasn't real. The world is still there, but the dreamer's relationship to it, it's changed, fundamentally. So moksha is like waking up from that dream of separation, realizing that our true nature is this boundless awareness, this Atman that's one with Brahman.
Exactly. And while we still experience the world, with our senses and thoughts and emotions, the grip of those experiences loosens. We no longer identify with this limited self, the ego, that's caught in the ups and downs of life.
I see. But it still seems a bit abstract. Can you give like a more concrete example of how someone who has realized moksha might experience the world differently?
Sure. Imagine someone facing a challenging situation. For someone who is identified with their ego, this might trigger a lot of fear, anxiety, a desire to control the outcome. But for someone who has realized moksha, there's a sense of detachment from those reactions. They still experience the situation, but there's a deeper awareness that they are not defined by it.
So it's not about becoming emotionless or indifferent to life's challenges, but experiencing them from a place of greater freedom and understanding.
Right. And this understanding, this realization of our true nature, it naturally leads to a deep sense of peace, joy, and compassion.
That makes sense. Seeing everyone and everything is connected to that same source, that Brahman, it would change how you interact with the world. It would create compassion and understanding.
Absolutely. And the sources emphasize that. Someone who has attained moksha doesn't act from ego or personal gain, but from a place of selfless service and love.
Wow. That's inspiring. So moksha isn't just about personal liberation. It has like a ripple effect on the world around us.
It's a great observation. And the beauty of Vedanta is that it offers us a practical path, steps we can take to move towards moksha, towards realizing this freedom.
Right. We talked about some of those steps earlier. Self-inquiry, meditation, ethical living, detachment. Could you walk us through them a little more systematically?
Of course. In the sources, we see 5 steps that lead to this inner transformation. The first, as we've discussed, is self-inquiry. That question, who am I? It's about peeling back the layers of our conditioned identities and getting to the core.
Right. It's about moving beyond the surface level of who we think we are. Our job title, relationships, possessions.
Exactly. And as we engage in self-inquiry, we naturally start to cultivate the second step, detachment, vairagya.
Okay, so as we question our attachments, we loosen their grip on us. But how does that actually work? Can you give us an example?
Let's say you're attached to a particular outcome, getting a promotion. If you don't get it, you might feel disappointment, frustration, even failure. But with Vairagya, you understand that your worth isn't tied to that outcome. You still try, but you don't cling to the result.
So shifting our focus from the external outcome to the internal state of being.
Precisely. And this detachment doesn't make us passive or indifferent. It allows us to engage more freely, without that fear of loss or disappointment.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what's the next step on this path?
The third step is the purification of the mind, chitta-shuddhi.
Okay.
This involves cultivating positive qualities, like kindness, compassion, and forgiveness, while letting go of the negative tendencies, like anger, greed, envy.
Sounds like a lifelong process.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to purify the mind in such a deep way?
It's a gradual process. It involves being mindful of our thoughts, words, and actions. Vedanta offers practices like meditation, ethical living, and self-reflection.
So aligning our inner world with those ethical principles, creating harmony between our thoughts, words, and actions.
Exactly. And as we purify the mind, we develop the fourth step, which is discrimination, viveka.
Discrimination. We were just talking about letting go of judgment. Now we're talking about discrimination. It seems a bit contradictory.
It's all about context. In Vedanta, discrimination refers to the ability to discern between the real and the unreal, the eternal and the temporary. It's about seeing through the illusion of Maya and recognizing the true nature of reality.
So developing a sharper inner compass to guide our choices.
Exactly. We learn to see what really matters, what brings lasting fulfillment, and what keeps us trapped in that cycle of suffering. We see that true happiness isn't found in fleeting pleasures or external achievements, but in the realization of our true nature.
I see. It's about aligning our actions with our understanding of that deeper reality. So we've got self-inquiry, detachment, purification, discrimination. What's the final step?
The fifth and final step is surrender. Ishvara pranidhana.
Surrender. Isn't that giving up? Admitting defeat?
No, not at all. In Vedanta, surrender is not about weakness. It's about letting go of the need to control everything, accepting what is, and trusting in a higher power or the flow of life.
So recognizing that we're not the sole authors of our destiny. There's a greater intelligence at work.
You could say that. It's a shift from ego-driven striving to a state of acceptance and allowing. It doesn't mean we become passive, but we approach life with trust and openness instead of resistance.
That's a beautiful way to frame it. And it sounds like all these steps, self-inquiry, detachment, purification, discrimination, and surrender, they build on each other, leading us toward moksha.
They do. And the beauty of it is that this path is open to everyone. Regardless of our background or beliefs, we can all embark on this journey of self-discovery and move towards a life of greater freedom and fulfillment.
This has been so insightful. Exploring Vedanta and the path to moksha. We've covered a lot. From the core concepts of Atman and Brahman to the practical steps to realize our true nature. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, from your perspective, what is the most important takeaway? What do you hope our listeners will remember from this deep dive?
That's a great question. If I had to pick one, it would be this: true peace and happiness. They aren't something we have to search for. They are already within us, inherent in our nature as Atman, as that which is one with Brahman. The journey of Vedanta is about uncovering this truth, realizing that we are already free, whole, complete.
That's a powerful message. And it seems like Vedanta offers a roadmap for this journey.
It does, and it's available to every one of us.
Well, we've definitely given our listeners a lot to think about. I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. Join us next time as we explore more of the world of Vedanta.
Welcome back. It's been quite a journey so far. Exploring Vedanta, this ancient philosophy that offers a path to self-realization and liberation from suffering. We've covered the core concepts, tools for self-discovery, and even those 5 steps towards moksha.
It really has. It's been fascinating to unpack all these ideas and see how they're connected. We've talked about Atman, our true self, being one with Brahman, the ultimate reality. We've explored Maya, this illusion of separateness, and how that causes suffering.
Yeah, and we even delved into those 5 steps: self-inquiry, detachment, purification of the mind, discrimination, and surrender, leading to that state of liberation, moksha. But before we wrap up, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You said that moksha isn't just about personal liberation. It has a ripple effect on the world. Can you say more about that? Sure. When we realize our true nature as Atman, as one with everything, our actions naturally become more aligned with that understanding. We don't act out of ego. or self-interest, but from a place of compassion and interconnectedness.
So the more we embody this moksha, the more our actions reflect that inner peace
So
and wisdom.
that's right. The sources emphasize this, that a person who has attained moksha, they naturally embody qualities like kindness, compassion, forgiveness, and a sense of equanimity. They're no longer reacting to the world from fear or attachment, but from understanding and
Love. It's a beautiful image.
Yeah,
Like the light of their realization,
Yeah.
shining outward, illuminating the world.
I love that. And this ripple effect, it's not limited to just like our interactions. As we embody these qualities, we inspire others to do the same. We create a more harmonious world just by being who we are.
So pursuing moksha isn't selfish. It's actually a path of service to the world.
Yes, precisely. By liberating ourselves, we contribute to the liberation of everyone. It's a paradox.
It really is. This has been such an insightful deep dive. It's given us so much to think about, to reflect on, maybe even to try out. As we wrap up, is there one final question or idea you want to leave our listeners with?
I would invite our listeners to consider this Vedantic statement, Tat Teva Masi, which means you are that. It reminds us that our true nature, Atman, is identical to Brahman, that ultimate reality. It's a reminder of that oneness, connecting us all.
That's beautiful. You are that. It reminds us that peace and joy, that wisdom we all seek, it's not out there. It's within each of us.
It is, and as we journey through life, may we all remember this and let it guide our thoughts, our words, and actions.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. This has been an incredible exploration of Vedanta.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.